I was rolling out dough for apple pie when I heard my son's voice coming from the living room. "Honey, use Mom's card. She's got like 130,000 saved up." The rolling pin froze in my hands. For a moment I thought I had imagined it, but then my daughter-in-law, Sophie, laughed softly. "Are you sure, Ryan? She won't get mad?" My son's answer cut through the air. "Mom won't say a word. She lives here for free, eats our food, uses our electricity. It's the least she can do to help us out." I felt something in my chest crack open. 40 years of work, of sewing until my fingers bled, of cleaning other people's floors, all reduced to that one line, "She lives here for free." I stood there, hands covered in flour, staring at the kitchen wall, as if I could see through it into the living room. My son, the boy I raised alone after his father left, was sitting there handing my debit card to his wife as if it belonged to him. The kitchen felt smaller, the air heavier. My heart pounded so hard that I could hear it echo in my ears. I remembered every dollar in that account, every hour I had worked since I was 14. I had taken in sewing jobs, cleaned houses, watched other people's children while mine stayed home alone. I had skipped vacations, new shoes, dinners out, all for one dream: to buy a small place of my own someday, where I could grow old quietly without being a burden to anyone. And now my son was giving that away like spare change. Sophie's voice broke my thoughts. "I'll head to the mall then, Josephine. Need anything?" she called sweetly, pretending we were friends. "No, thank you," I managed, keeping my back turned so she wouldn't see my face. The front door closed, a car engine started, silence. I sat down, staring at my old hands, veined and spotted, but still steady enough to protect what I had left. My son thought I lived here for free. He thought my love came with no boundaries, that he could take everything I had because I was his mother. I realized then that I wasn't angry at Sophie. Not really, she was greedy, yes, but the real betrayal came from the person who should have protected me. Ryan had stopped seeing me as his mother a long time ago. Now, I was just a source of money, a convenient helper in the house. But something inside me shifted that day. I wasn't going to cry this time. I had cried enough in this house. That afternoon, while the dough dried and the oven stayed cold, I sat still for a long time and made a silent promise to myself. This would be the last day anyone used my silence as permission. Sophie left for the mall humming a cheerful tune. I stayed in the kitchen, pretending to tidy up, my mind racing. Every sound in the house felt louder: the ticking clock, the hum of the refrigerator, my own heartbeat. Then, for the first time in my life, I made a decision for myself, not for anyone else. I wiped my hands, took my old flip phone from the counter, and called the bank. "Good morning, National Savings. How can I help you?" a pleasant voice answered. "Good morning," I said, steadying my breath. "I need to block my debit card immediately." The woman on the other end asked for my information. I gave it calmly, even though my hands trembled. "Is the card lost or stolen?" she asked. "Let's just say someone's using it without my permission." "Understood, ma'am. Your card is now blocked. No transactions can be made from this moment." When she confirmed it was done, I felt a strange kind of peace, like closing a door that should have been shut years ago. I hung up and exhaled. For the first time in years, I had done something that protected me. Minutes later, the sound of Ryan's footsteps echoed down the hallway. He walked in, phone in hand, face tense. "Mom, what did you do? Sophie just called me. The card isn't working. Did you block it?" "Yes," I replied without hesitation. He stared at me, confused. "Why would you do that? She's standing at the checkout with a cart full of things for the house. You're embarrassing her." "I didn't give her permission to use my card," I said. Ryan scoffed. "Oh, come on, Mom, it's for the house. A new TV, a sofa, some appliances. We all live here. It's not a big deal." I looked at him, my son, standing tall and impatient, holding a phone that seemed more important than the woman who raised him. "It's a big deal to me," I said. "Mom, don't start this. You live here rent-free. You could at least help out once in a while." "I give you my pension every month, Ryan. I cook, I clean, I do everything in this house," I said quietly, my voice shaking not from fear but from years of exhaustion. He sighed, annoyed. $500 isn't enough to cover what you use. Electricity, food, it all costs money. You're being selfish." Something broke loose inside me. Selfish. I repeated softly. I've spent 40 years giving everything I had to you, to this family. And you call me selfish because I want to keep the little that's mine." Ryan didn't answer. He just stared, lips pressed tight, unsure of how to react to a mother who finally said no. When he turned and left the kitchen, I stood by the window, looking out at my garden. The roses I had planted bloomed quietly, untouched by his anger. I realized I didn't have to shout to reclaim my dignity. All I needed was silence and the courage to walk away. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Ryan's words echoing in my head, "She lives here for free." Free. The word haunted me. At dawn, I got up, made coffee, and sat at the kitchen table. The house was quiet, but it didn't feel peaceful. It felt like a stranger's home. Every corner reminded me of how much I had given up my little apartment I once owned, my savings, my pride. 20 years earlier, Ryan had come to me, newly married and full of plans. "Mom, Sophie and I found a house, but we're short on the down payment," he had said. I had sold my 2-bedroom apartment, the one I worked my whole life to buy, and handed him $50,000. "It's a loan," he had promised. "I'll pay you back in 2 years. He never did. That morning, as I looked around, I realized something simple yet painful. I had no space that was truly mine. Not even my room, just a small converted pantry with a narrow bed and a single window facing the fence. By 7, the house began to stir. Ryan went to work. Sophie slammed cabinets while getting ready for her day. No one spoke to me. No one even looked my way. When Sophie's car finally disappeared down the street, I went to my room. My decision was clear. I took out 2 old suitcases from under the bed. I packed neatly clothes, a few shoes, photographs, my birth certificate, my late husband's ring, a small wooden jewelry box. I folded a handwritten note and placed it on the dining table. It read, "Ryan, I'm leaving. I can't keep living in a house where my only value is my money. Thank you for these years, but I need to get my dignity back. Don't look for me. When I have my own place, I'll send you the address. I love you, but I love myself more. Mom." I placed the house keys beside the note. Then I looked around one last time. The kitchen where I had cooked thousands of meals, the living room where I was never welcome to sit, the dining room where my chair was always the least comfortable. I whispered goodbye to them all. At 9 o'clock, I called a cab. As I stepped outside with my suitcases, Mr. Collins, my elderly neighbor, was watering his garden. "Morning, Margaret. Heating somewhere?" I smiled softly. "Something like that, Mr. Collins." The taxi arrived. The driver helped load my luggage and asked for the address. I gave him Helen's, my old friend from the factory. As the car pulled away, I didn't look back. I thought I would cry, but no tears came. Instead, there was a strange lightness in my chest. For the first time in 20 years, I was going somewhere I truly wanted to be away. Helen lived in a small apartment complex on the quieter side of town. When the taxi stopped in front, she was already standing at the door, waving as if she had been waiting for me her whole life. The moment I stepped out, she hugged me tight. "You're safe now," she whispered, and for the first time in a long time, I let myself believe it. Her apartment was modest but warm. A single bedroom, a small living room, sunlight spilling through cream-colored curtains. There were potted plants by the window, photos of her grandkids on the wall, and the faint smell of lavender. It wasn't luxury, it was peace. Helen made tea and waited until I spoke. The words came out all at once: the overheard conversation, the blocked card, the confrontation, the note I had left behind. She listened quietly, her eyes soft but full of fire. When I finished, I looked down at my cup. "I don't know what's wrong with me," I said. "Maybe I should have stayed quiet. Maybe I overreacted." Helen reached across the table and took my hands. "Margaret, don't you dare say that. You didn't lose 20 years trying to earn your son's love. You gave 20 years of unconditional love. There's a difference." Her voice was steady, the kind that pulled you out of your own fog. "But he's my son," I whispered. "Mothers aren't supposed to walk away." "Mothers are supposed to love," Helen said firmly. "But love isn't slavery. You're not leaving your son. You're leaving the pain." Her words struck something deep inside me. All the guilt, the fear, the shame, it started to crumble. Helen stood up and clapped her hands once. "Now, here's what we're going to do. You'll stay here with me for as long as you need. Tomorrow we'll start looking for a place of your own, somewhere bright, somewhere peaceful." I tried to protest, but she wouldn't hear it. "You've always been the strong one, Margaret," she said. You just forgot for a while. That night I lay on her sofa bed, listening to the city hum outside. It was small, a little lumpy, but it felt like heaven. No one was shouting, no one was demanding, no one was taking. I fell asleep with tears on my cheeks, not of sadness this time, but of relief. The next morning, Helen woke me with the smell of coffee and toast. "Come on, sleepyhead," she said cheerfully. "We have apartments to see." I laughed for the first time in months. We spent the morning looking through listings online, writing down addresses and prices. I had saved $130,000 in totalers, and I wasn't afraid to use part of it now. For once, the money would serve me, not someone else. We saw 5 apartments that day. The first was too dark, windows facing a brick wall. The second smelled of mildew. The third was beautiful but too expensive, nearly $80,000. The fourth was bright but right next to a highway. The noise was unbearable. Then we found it. A small 1-bedroom apartment on the second floor of a quiet building near a park. The moment we walked in, sunlight poured through the big front window. The walls were pale beige, the floors newly polished. A small kitchen opened into the living area, and through the window, I could see children playing in the park and old couples walking hand in hand. It wasn't large, maybe 600 square feet, but it felt open and full of life. "This one," I said almost immediately. Helen smiled knowingly. "I can see it on your face. You're already living here in your mind." The landlord, a kind man named Mr. Grant, showed us around. "It's $55,000 if you buy it outright," he said. "Comes with a small storage unit and parking." I looked at Helen. She nodded. "I'll take it," I said, surprising even myself. My voice sounded confident, like it belonged to someone stronger. Mr. Grant smiled. "That's a good decision, ma'am. This apartment has good energy. The last owner lived here happily for 20 years. We shook hands, and I wrote a $5,000 check for the deposit. As we walked out, Helen threw her arm around me. "You did it, Margaret. You're starting over." I laughed and felt something I hadn't felt in decades: excitement. The kind that comes when you realize your future is yours again. That night, back at Helen's, I couldn't stop smiling. I imagined the furniture, the curtains, the plants I would grow on the balcony. It wasn't just a purchase. It was a promise that the rest of my life would belong to me. It had been nearly a week since I left, and I hadn't heard from Ryan until that Thursday evening. The intercom in Helen's apartment buzzed nonstop. Helen went to answer. "Who is it?" she asked through the speaker. "It's Ryan. Please, I need to talk to my mom," came the voice, desperate, familiar, and tired. Helen looked at me. I hesitated for a second, then nodded. "Let him up, but stay here with me," I said quietly. Moments later, Ryan appeared at the door. He looked different: wrinkled shirt, messy hair, dark circles under his eyes. Not the confident man who used to tower over me with authority, but a boy who'd lost his way. "Mom," he said softly. "Ryan," I replied, keeping my tone calm but distant. "Can we talk?" he asked, glancing nervously at Helen standing behind me with her arms crossed. "Here is fine," I said. He exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "Mom, this whole thing got out of hand. Grace shouldn't have used your card without asking, but you didn't have to leave. You scared us." "You weren't scared for me, Ryan," I said. "You were scared because your wife's shopping spree got stopped at the register." "That's not fair," he snapped. "We're family. Families help each other." "Families also respect each other," I replied. He took a step closer. "You've lived with us for 20 years, Mom. We've given you a roof, food, everything you need." I met his eyes steadily. "You gave me a pantry-sized room. You treated me like a guest in a house I helped buy. I gave you my pension, my time, my work, and you called that free." "Mom, don't do this," he said, voice rising. "Grace and I were just trying to make improvements to the house. It's not like we were stealing." $82,000 without my consent isn't helping, Ryan. It's taking," I said evenly. His expression shifted from guilt to irritation. "Fine, I admit it was a lot, but Grace didn't mean harm. Come home, and we'll fix this. I promise it'll never happen again." "I'm not coming back," I said quietly. "Tomorrow I sign the deed for my new apartment. I've already made my choice." He froze, eyes wide. "You bought an apartment without talking to me first. Mom, what if it's a scam? What if someone's taking advantage of you?" I smiled faintly. "After 40 years of managing every dollar on my own, I think I can handle it." I don't need your permission. His voice grew cold. How much do you have left? And there it was, the real reason for his visit. That's none of your concern, I said. I'm your son. I have a right to know, he argued. Helen stepped forward. Young man, you have no right to your mother's money. None. Ryan turned to her, angry. Stay out of this. Helen's eyes narrowed. This is my house, and I'll ask you to leave if you raise your voice again. Ryan looked back at me, his face flushed with anger. You're really doing this, huh? Letting strangers turn you against your own son. I took a breath, my voice trembling but strong. The family broke when you stopped seeing me as your mother and started seeing me as your AT-maz. Ryan's jaw clenched. Grace was right. You only think of yourself. I didn't respond. I simply walked to the door and opened it. Goodbye, Ryan. He stood frozen for a moment, then walked past me without another word. The elevator doors closed, and with them, 20 years of silence and pain. Helen wrapped her arms around me as I finally let the tears fall. It's over, she whispered. And deep down, I knew she was right. Something old had ended, but something new was finally beginning. The next morning, the sky was clear and golden. It felt like the world itself was starting over with me. Helen insisted on coming along to the lawyer's office. You're not doing this alone, she said, buttoning her cream-colored blouse like she was dressing for a celebration. When we arrived, the lawyer, Mr. Hughes, greeted us warmly. The seller, Mr. Grant, was already there with a folder of papers neatly arranged on the desk. Good morning, Mrs. Holloway, Mr. Hughes said. Are you ready to become a homeowner? I smiled. More than ready. The process took nearly 2 hours. I signed document after document, deed, title, ownership certificates, each signature a quiet declaration of independence. My hand trembled slightly when I handed over the cashier's check for $55,000. It was almost half of everything I had, but it felt right. When Mr. Hughes finally said, Congratulations, Mrs. Holloway. The apartment is now legally yours, he handed me an envelope with the deed and a small silver keychain holding 3 keys. I stared at those keys for a long moment. They looked ordinary smooth metal, small ridges, but to me, they meant freedom, safety, and dignity. Helen clapped her hands together. You did it, Margaret. You really did it. I laughed through the tears that suddenly filled my eyes. I guess I did. We walked out of the office and into the sunlight, where Helen grabbed my hand and raised it high like I had just won a marathon. People passing by turned to look, smiling, maybe not understanding why 2 older women were cheering in the middle of the street, but it didn't matter. We went straight to my apartment. For the first time, I opened the door with my key. The lock turned smoothly, and the door swung open to the same flood of light I remembered from the first visit. Everything was still and silent, yet the room seemed to hum with possibility. Helen followed behind me, setting her purse on the counter. It's even better now that it's yours, she said. We spent the rest of the afternoon cleaning, wiping down surfaces, sweeping floors, washing windows. Even though the place was already spotless, I wanted to make it my own in every sense. By the time we finished, the sun was setting, filling the apartment with warm gold light. I stood in the center of the living room holding my new keys, breathing deeply. For the first time in 20 years, I wasn't living in someone else's house. I was home. The next few days passed in a quiet rhythm I had almost forgotten could exist. Every morning, sunlight poured through the big window, waking me softly instead of with shouting or slammed doors. I made coffee in my small kitchen, poured it into my favorite mug, and sat by the window overlooking the park. Children's laughter floated up from below, mixing with birdsong. For the first time in decades, I felt safe in my own silence. Helen visited every afternoon, bringing something small, a lamp she found at a thrift shop, a basket of fruit, or simply her company. We're going to fill this place with good memories, she'd say as she unpacked groceries onto my shelves. I began building a new routine: morning walks in the park, afternoons knitting by the window, evenings reading or writing small thoughts in a notebook. My life was simple, but it was mine. One day, while sitting on a park bench, an elderly woman stopped to rest beside me. She had bright eyes and moved with the energy of someone who refused to let age slow her down. Beautiful day, isn't it? She said. It really is, I replied. We talked for nearly an hour. Her name was Ruth. She had been widowed for 10 years with 5 children living in different states. When my husband passed, I thought my life was over. she said. But I learned something: when you live alone, you don't lose people. You find yourself. Those words stayed with me. That night, as I looked out over the quiet street, I whispered them to myself: you find yourself. 3 months after I moved in, my phone buzzed with a message from Ryan. Mom, I know we haven't talked. Grace and I are having problems. She always wants more money, more things. I think I understand now how you felt. I'm sorry for how I treated you. I don't expect forgiveness, but I needed you to know that I see it now. I read his message twice, my hands trembling slightly. Helen came over that afternoon, and I showed her the text. What are you going to do? She asked gently. I'll reply, I said, but this time with boundaries. That night I wrote back. Ryan, understanding is the first step. I forgive you, but I'm no longer the mother who gives everything at her own expense. I have my own life now, and I intend to live it fully. If you can respect that, we can start again. I pressed send and turned off my phone. For once, I didn't feel guilt or fear, only peace. A year passed faster than I expected. Seasons came and went through my big window: spring rains, summer light, autumn leaves, winter frost, and with each one, I found a new part of myself. I turned 69 that June. Helen threw me a small party in my apartment. There were 3 neighbors, a homemade cake, and music from an old radio. We laughed until midnight. It wasn't grand, but it was real. Ryan came the next morning with a box of pastries and a nervous smile. His eyes looked softer than I remembered. Happy birthday, Mom, he said, setting the box on my counter. I know I don't deserve to be here, but I wanted to see you. I nodded slowly. You're always welcome when you come with respect. He exhaled and looked around the apartment. It's beautiful, he said quietly. You seem happy. I am, I replied. Not because of what I have, but because of what I no longer allow. He nodded, eyes glistening. Grace left a few months ago. She said she needed someone with more money. I guess that's the price for letting greed run your life. I'm sorry, Ryan, I said sincerely. He shook his head. Don't be. It was a lesson I needed. I understand now what you were trying to protect. We sat by the window, sharing coffee and quiet laughter. For the first time in years, there was no tension, no demands, only understanding. He didn't ask about money, and I didn't offer it. Later, as he left, he hugged me tightly. You taught me more by walking away than by staying, Mom. After he was gone, I stood by the window and looked at the fading sky. I thought about everything that had happened: the betrayal, the pain, the courage it took to leave. People often say peace is something you find at the end of life, but I've learned it's something you fight for every single day. I don't have luxuries, but I have freedom. I don't have a mansion, but I have a home filled with light and laughter. Sometimes I still whisper it to myself like a prayer. I'm not rich, but I'm free. And that, my dear, is the most expensive thing I've ever earned. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and comment where you're watching from. Because maybe someone out there needs to be reminded. You're never too old to take your life back.